we do PC LAN parties, like the first 2 hours is making it work. It's terrible. But like we've done, some of the leaders and I have done Halo LAN parties so much in the past few years. We got it down. Like I have a LAN party tub that just is like everything we'll need. I know what makes it work. I know what makes it work. Like I know what will make your console not be able to play the game. It's done now. We have it done. It's not like PC LAN party. PC LAN party is ridiculous to get going.
My power supply fell on top of the motherboard, sorry.
Yeah, it's been really bad on all of our systems because this.
Oh gosh, no.
That's the worst. When, like one person has a slow computer and everybody sucks at we did. There's an old retro game we love on PC that got released on Steam, and now it supports modern resolution. It's so old that it only does the square resolution on the original game. And it's Age of Empires 2. And so like the leaders and I love the leaders that play Age of Empires 2, but when they went and released on Steam, they took out the game. So you can only play over Steam. And that works pretty good for all our houses, but as soon as they all come and get on my same Wi-Fi, it just crumbles. And like the numbers are going like 4, 5,362.
Come on, really?
You know, words that don't make sense instead of numbers.
Are you kidding me?
Who has a data-enabled cell phone? Hold it up.
I don't anymore.
What happened?
Dad took it away.
We got one.
I
Anybody
forgot
else?
mine. You broke it.
Okay, well that's fun.
You're calling him out?
Your phone. Oh, my phone. Okay, I don't care.
I don't want it in the bucket. I want him to hold it up. You gotta listen to the instructions, Allie. Because you've been here forever.
So
and you
give
know
me your
everything.
phone.
All right, is that it? We got three? Three's it? Okay, we're gonna do Kahoot. We got 3 teams now. The phones are the team captains. So huddle up around someone with a phone.
Yo,
Spread out
wait.
phone holders.
I don't want. Oh, I have to be over here.
You want to have Here. Okay, here. It's running out.
I got three.
The longer grades. I know.
Our team name could be the Scooch. Okay. Daniel, what am I looking up? I forget this every time, but
Ethan, come on over here. Whoa, Noah. Come on.
There we go.
Daniel, what is it?
Your teams cannot stand in front of the screen. Just,
No, everyone's on that team. We gotta join them. Because there's some newbies. Noah.
Good. We got older guys, younger guys, and
Okay.
all the girls.
Oh yeah!
In the.
So, you guys win automatically, right?
But we won last time, so it's all good.
What's our
Does
team?
anyone have no idea what they're doing? Does anyone need
Older
help
guys?
doing
I have no idea.
this? Okay.
Older guys.
You don't have to see it.
And then we get to name our team. Okay.
You just turn off Wi-Fi.
Okay, we got our team name.
Older guys?
You
Seriously?
can't think of one.
I like how I immediately just
Oh yeah.
look over.
And then you get to type in any nickname.
I just
So how much team round 2?
Wait,
Get that
they just
five.
like take you to this point? Wait,
Go name
No,
your team.
that's ours right there. Older guys.
Wait. Can I slow down? I went to some garbage website. I put for boy.
Read.
Well, his screen is tiny and my thumbs are fat.
Girl name.
Okay.
Sorry.
You know, we did
Yeah, when you
winners
type
every
names wrong,
point.
you go to some really garbage website. It's a quiz show. You do a quiz show. How much of your team is graduating into 9th grade?
Do you guys want your names or do you guys
2?
We are. I'm an 8th grade. Alright, so.
Okay, we gotta find a
That's my team. Alright, so. Spinner.
Alright guys, if you want to add names, you have about 20 seconds. You gotta go fast. 20 seconds if you want to add person names.
Okay, then he wants a nickname, and then you have to add your own.
No!
There we go, we got it.
What is that last name?
Alright, 5 seconds till I start. 5, 4,
I don't understand
3,
anymore.
2,
Oh, my dad got
1,
all night. I was
and go! Old Testament quiz.
What are the first Oh, whoops. What? Oh.
It's a name for the group of those books.
Oh. Wait, I got it correct. Hey.
Wow.
Yeah, we got it right.
Wait, we
Someone got it wrong.
told you it wasn't that. What did we do?
Older guys.
Yeah.
You got it so wrong.
Yeah, we have
I
so
know.
wrong.
I saw the name pop up on the screen and I was like, one. I just like knew. What is it?
I don't think we're right.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, okay, I didn't pay attention.
Alright, now we're starting.
Alright, you got some points.
Hey, come on.
Hey, look who's winning.
The girl.
It's the winners.
Yeah.
Alright, Alright, join the team. We're playing a quiz.
What's up, mate?
Which one?
My name's the Gum Gum.
Doesn't matter.
Just
Oh,
pass
who?
you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh,
Sweet.
I knew it, cause
that's okay.
oh,
There's so many.
let's go.
What? Oh, Genesis.
I didn't see it. What were the first and last?
First Genesis.
First and
Last.
Guys, woo! Let's go.
Wow, you guys all got that. I'm impressed.
But I did.
Yes.
You guys are winning.
Ha!
There's about. Oh shoot. Look. Grab the two. It was 150. I remember that 150 was the last.
Wow, a spread.
We got it.
Oh, back in the lead.
There he is.
If only I had a Bible.
Checking in the Bible is never cheating.
Yeah, but you're gonna
No,
take
check the instruction manual.
Using your Bible is never cheating.
You're gonna take it.
Get a Bible.
We got 50 seconds.
Yeah, but your point value is based on how fast you answer.
Ah.
I'm gonna guess 40.
See if you get it right, you might only get like. Whoa!
Alright.
We're the only ones that.
Don't forget that because you might need it later for a math problem.
Wait. No math. Bible math.
That's not true. Have you ever read the book of First Chronicles?
No, that's the first one.
Everyone needs numbers to know genealogy. It's not. It's First Chronicles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no.
No one got it.
No one got that one.
That was
That
really
guys,
sad.
by the way, means that the other answers you chose were all out of order. So every
Oh, it's
answer.
Leviticus number.
Oh yeah. It's great explorers like nacho cheese. No, nacho dip. Nacho dip.
Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Great Explorers, Love, Nacho Dip.
I learned that from Awanas.
That's great. I just remember the real thing.
Yes, I knew.
That's how I always remember it. Because I like nachos.
We got it.
Look at the baby.
Yes.
Oh
I
my
like how all the
Yeah.
girls look and all the guys are just like, you know what?
Quick, guys, you have an opening.
First Chronicles. Yeah, there is.
After. It doesn't count down.
Okay. Second Chronicles.
Third collision.
No, it's Galatians.
None of these answers are correct, Daniel.
We got it wrong.
Daniel, none of these answers are correct.
Yay!
Oh, it's 20.
Alright, pick Third Chronicles.
No, that was.
Alex, did you guys pick Third Chronicles? No, I didn't.
No, we picked.
There are no Third Chronicles.
I don't. We picked Third Chronicles. No, we didn't. Oh, yeah, you did. I actually did it.
Oh,
Come on.
You do it now. You told me to do it. So you do it. Are you kidding?
Are you? Just.
What's multiple choice? It's not that hard.
Why is it too fast? Just guess. You have to answer it.
Oh wow. We got 5,000. Catch on that. Yes.
I was like, yes, it is.
Oh my god.
How many books are there in this?
You know, yeah, you do. 1,000.
You guys sound like a pen of snakes.
Who chose?
I knew it was 66. I told you. Wait, you got.
Yeah.
Hey, we have a street for it. Is that the one that's winning?
No, this one.
No!
Sure.
You guys are cheating. You have the
Bible with you.
2 Bibles.
It's
to be
never
Put it
changed
away.
to look in
This
the
is
Bible.
the end. It's so horrible. I have a Bible.
It just means
Where?
it'll take
Whoa, none of you guys got it?
I remember.
I did.
That was
What?
bad.
I knew it was
Those
this
were
one.
that one.
It was the orange.
Just totally breaking the law. I already got one right here.
Guys, quick. How many chapters in David? What? 70. Yeah. 72. For 72.
Okay, yeah. Let's go to this.
Yes, we did.
Oh.
I knew it. Wait, can we look at the scoreboard?
No matter how hard you try, you're never gonna catch up.
Because you guys are probably in like the.
How many books are in the new?
I'm pretty sure he's trying to trick us. But whatever.
There we go. And we're lost.
See, yeah, actually, I told you.
Oh, yeah, yes, that's
One time I had to get it right.
And the moment of truth?
We told you!
You guys did get close though. Very close.
Sorry, and we didn't even get that. We didn't even get that. Like, I still can't.
I didn't say you get close.
I'm not even on the team.
What were we doing? We're 1,200.
Let's play again. Oh, that was close though.
No, you should just leave that up.
Alright guys, phones in the bucket, data or otherwise.
Oh no. That would have been great. I vote yes on that.
Good. Okay.
Oh, you just got kicked out your spot. Except for, it wasn't your spot.
Alex.
That's it, I used to drag it like a little bit further up, and I
I
just
need
sit
somebody to
down.
post, so I did.
I just like,
That's our album.
Daniel used to get so mad
Our
at me.
wallpaper
He'd
really
be like,
good.
back
No
up.
what? No what?
I like the progress though.
Logan, no what?
So what is that?
Logan.
Dragon with donuts! I'm gonna gain
So we have an event coming up you should all go to. It comes with free donuts, so why not?
We don't have donuts on me there.
I'm bribing people with dinos, I'm giving you love.
Dinos and dragons.
Wait, like I slept for like 500 years.
You're mad. There was a piece of your hair on my coffee cup, Olivia. What is wrong with you? I don't know. You shed some.
Liar.
Wow, the volume's like super low.
Well, that everybody's talking.
Dinosaurs!
Bunch of losers.
Inundate people with evolutionary thinking. You would assume that canyon required many years to form, but instead it was formed in a single day.
Whoa, what have we got here? It seems to describe what the Bible is talking about. It talks about a global deluge.
Part of this evolutionary story asserts that dinosaurs evolved into birds.
We are not the product of evolution, and we have not been here for millions of years.
The discovery of soft tissues in dinosaur fossils sparked a revolution in paleontology. But there are indications in the fossils that this story doesn't add up.
This is a great bit of evidence that points towards a young Earth, that these fossils are not millions of years old, but were buried only a few thousands of years ago.
We see flood sediments pushed way up into these mountains. Tremendous upheaval was going on in the Earth.
This is bigger than an asteroid. There's a consistent pattern of the water moving across continents, 1,000 feet or more above present sea level.
We can use the truth about dinosaurs to show people that the Bible really is true from the very beginning.
What happened to them? Did they slowly go extinct? Or was it something sudden, something global, cataclysmic? Can science answer these questions? Can the Bible unravel this mystery? Uncovering the truth about dinosaurs.
So we're going to be doing a 4-week Bible study. It's junior high age and up. So even you guys who are graduating, you are allowed to come. You're invited to come. If you have anyone you know that's junior high age or older that would be interested to find out how dinosaurs fit in with the Bible, to find out how paleontology actually confirms the Bible, invite them. I don't care if they're 70. They can come.
Really?
Yeah, they'll still get a donut.
I'll
they'll still
bring
get
my
some, but
grandpa. He loves donuts.
Good. So, that's going to be every Friday night this month, except this Friday.
I got it at
Wait, did I get that wrong? No, my bad. Sorry. Every Friday this month, including this Friday. I forgot that last Friday was this month. I just remember it wasn't this Friday. That already happened. So yeah, starting Friday and for 3 more weeks after that, it's a 4-week study. Come here, have some free donuts, talk about dinosaurs. Starts at 7 o'clock. Friday nights we'll be meeting in here. We'll watch the video, and we'll either stay in one big group or split into small groups. Just depends on how many of you guys there are. If there's too many people, we'll do small groups. That way everyone gets a chance to ask their questions. If we stay in a huge group, then we'll probably won't get to everyone's questions.
Okay.
Yeah, Alan.
Is it high school Bible study the same time?
It is, and so I talked to them about that. I hang out with the high school leaders too sometimes. And so they've decided to make the first half of their Friday nights for this month only be Dinos, Dragons, and Donuts.
Oh, okay.
And then, because their usual Friday night they do every single week goes till 10 o'clock.
Okay.
And so they have plenty of time when we're done, around like 8:30, to go back downstairs. Plus they start at 6, so they'll be together for an hour, then come do Dinos, Dragons, and Donuts with us, and they'll still have another like hour and a half when we're done.
Oh, okay.
So they have plenty of time to still do their normal thing. Yeah.
When does Dinos, Dragons, and Donuts start? Like, not the day, but what time?
7 p.m.
Okay.
Yeah. 7 p.m. to 8:30.
7:01 p.m. Daniel, get it right.
If you go
So yeah, make sure you're on time. Donuts will probably be the first thing that happens.
I'll be early.
And so if you're late, I'm sorry.
No donuts.
you might not get a donut.
I'm bringing my own donuts.
Well, fine.
Hands
Yours too.
off.
All right, so that is happening on Friday. Also, today is the last chance to sign up for summer camp. If you've not thought about summer camp, if you've not talked about summer camp with your parents, today is your very last chance. You can sign up on our website, so even after you leave the building, you just go to ccchico.com, click on the camp banner, go to the website, fill in your details, sign up for camp. Or grab a flyer today, go talk to your parents about it. If you are that weird junior hire I can't seem to figure out, and you're like, no, I can't go, and then I'm like, why? Did you talk to your parents? You're like, no, I didn't. And I'm like, well, how do you know you can't go? And you're like, I just know I can't. This is me going, cha, slap you in the face. Talk to your parents about camp. Oh my gosh, you can't just assume you can't go because you haven't been able to go to camp before.
Already did.
I already did,
Junior
and I
high
can't.
is like the age where parents are like, oh yeah, I probably should go to camp. So,
Getting so old.
talk to them about camp. Remember, today, last chance. If you don't talk to them today, you have to wait till next year. 8th graders. I've been talking to the high schoolers constantly about their summer camp. We have dates now.
Yeah.
It's going to be August 8th through 11th.
August 8th through 11th.
Yes, and it will be cheaper than our camp because it's shorter than our camp.
Oh wow.
Does that make sense?
Just missed.
So,
Oh, then I'm
so
going
we're
to that
gone.
one.
We're gone to junior high camp for 6 days. They're gone to high school camp for 4 days.
How much cheaper?
It's about that much cheaper. So like their camp is 2/3 our length, so their camp cost will be about 2/3 our cost.
Oh, that's not bad.
So that's cool, right? So it's shorter, but it's cheaper. And then they're gonna go to Pilot Lake. They're gonna go to the same place that church camp is at.
Sweet. We're going.
So if you already know where church camp is and all the cool stuff that's there at that camp, then you know what's gonna be at high school camp. So yeah, awesome sauce. Go talk to the high school leaders for more details. Price has not been set, which is why they can't charge you money yet. So, but yeah, but just tell them you're interested in camp, and then you'll get more details from them. Annie Hoosie. Here's a quick camp video for all you new people.
I'm gonna give you my heart, 'cause you're a sky, 'cause you're a sky full of stars, 'cause you light up the path. I don't care
Was anybody there 2 years ago when they played the tires on the slip and slide square?
I'm gonna cry.
Did you like that game?
Yes.
50-50? It was like the most fun game to watch ever. And so I was tempted to like suggest it to the high schoolers, see if they'll play it at camp. Do you think it'd be fun at camp with the high schoolers?
No.
I might suggest that one. Alright. That is camp. Don't forget, today, last day to sign up. When can you sign up for camp?
Today.
Can you sign up for camp tomorrow?
No.
Can
Yes.
you sign up for camp on Thursday?
Yeah.
Last Thursday you can.
is the day for
You guys are
everything.
unteachable.
Thank
So
you.
today, last chance to sign up for camp. Alright, so new people, you guys gotta know. Cell phones go in the cell phone bucket. Smartwatches go in the cell phone bucket. Tablets go in the cell phone bucket. Anything that's gonna go ding-a-ling in the middle of service goes
So should I
in the
put
cell
my
phone
head
bucket.
in the bucket?
What about me? Ding-a-ling, 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 ding-a-ling.
Ding-a-ling-a-ling.
Do I go in there?
You know, sometimes I open these doors for junior hires to misbehave, and I don't even realize that's what the door is. I have no clue what I'm getting myself into. Alright. So, 2 weeks ago, we did... My thingy's not on. There we go. We did Revelation. We did the second half of Revelation. 3 weeks ago, we did the first half of Revelation. When we finished the second half of Revelation, does anyone know what that marked? What that was? Yeah.
That was the end of reading through the whole Bible.
We went through the whole Bible. Yeah, 2 weeks ago we finished going through the whole Bible. Took us a year and a half, you know, but considering we only meet once a week, that's pretty quick. We did about a book a week, and we went through the whole thing. So all you new people, you missed the slow version. What we're gonna do this week and next week, we're gonna do the fast version. We're gonna do the entire Old Testament today, and next week we're gonna do the entire New Testament.
What I did this.
Yes, see,
Are you
why didn't we
like
just
one
do
verse
that in
from
the
each
first
book?
place? I hear you guys saying it already, and you're like, Daniel, we could have just done this in 2 weeks. Why did we do it for a year and a half?
It took a year and a half?
Took a year and a half. We started January 2016, and we finished 2 weeks ago, right before the 6 months. So maybe it was like, if you took out all the holidays where we took a break, maybe it was like a year and a quarter.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
It's not taking a year.
I live stream everything on YouTube. Go back to the videos and find when we started.
Well, you can go on YouTube.
Yeah, there's a little webcam right there.
Oh, whoops.
Hi, YouTube.
I am so confused.
Yeah, you guys have never noticed my little webcam?
No.
YouTube,
YouTube,
hello.
What's wrong with you?
The field of view, by the way, goes right down here to the edge of the bookshelf and couch. And then,
So the world is seeing me.
and then right there to the edge of the soundboard.
That's it.
Oh my god.
That's the field of view.
Isn't it filming right now?
It is live streaming right now.
No, wait, hold up. Hold up.
Little over a year and a half. There's actually like a glowing blue LED on both sides of it. Not this one.
How many
Not
lives?
that one. These two.
Oh my gosh.
Every stupid thing I've said in the last year and a half
Is picked up by this beautiful high quality microphone right here.
That's no! There's a stop! Daniel, why didn't you tell me this? Oh my gosh! When we started, I would have.
Because then I wouldn't have all these golden moments
No!
recorded.
I have said way too
We're gonna be perfect.
How many videos
How many
Katie,
stalkers
Katie,
are there?
You have to know, if you say something gloriously foolish, we actually write it down in the junior high phrase book.
Am I in
Are you serious?
We have a book
you write
of
down-
all of our favorite things you guys have ever said.
Did you
Wait,
write
allow
down
me to
I
make
survived
this
off
video.
YouTube
Let me
videos?
want to be in a book.
Did you
Does
write
that
that
mean
down?
if
I
I make
survived off popcorn and Minecraft
like-
YouTube videos for a whole day?
I only heard
Yeah,
like
this
3 of the
is
words
like
you said.
high-tech spy stalker.
See, this is that moment where I opened the door and I had no clue what I was doing. Alright, so,
Does that mean every bad joke I make will be in a book? Yeah.
so think of it like this though. Your parents wonder if you are different up here than you are with them.
They could just watch.
Don't know.
does.
Alright, so today we're going to try and get you from Genesis to Malachi, in case you got that question wrong. Genesis is the first book in the Old Testament. Malachi is the last book in the Old Testament. We're going to be looking at the whole story. We're going to try not to spend too much time on any one book. We already did that for a year and a half. Today we're going to try and get you the whole story in one go, try and get you the entire narrative. So, what I've been showing you guys for a year and a half is this slide. This slide, a year and a half, and every week a book flies out at you and we take a look at that book, or a few books fly out at you.
Can you bring all of them out?
What would that do, Katie? They just cover up
It's
the screen.
already separated, but could you though?
Well, how about this? How about if we turn this into a touchscreen and we just kind of slide these around into a timeline
What are
view?
you doing?
And
How
then-
do that?
That's so cool.
I didn't in a touch screen, and I just didn't see the clicker thing in your hand, and I was like, oh!
All right, real quick, raise your hand if you thought it was a touchscreen and I was doing that. Nope. No. I stayed up really late with the 8th grade guys on Friday night, and I slept a small portion of yesterday, but I didn't sleep at all Friday night. And I got to bed like last night at 3 a.m. because I was staying up making this for you guys. This is the interesting thing when you look through your Bible. When you start to try and do some research into these books and you figure out when they were all written, you'll notice they're not in order. They're not even close to being in order.
Nope.
Look at the dates, guys. 1400 BC, 1350 BC. Okay, that one makes sense. 1000 BC, 930, 600, 450. Back to 1400. 1440 through 500 BC, 900 BC, 950. Wait, that one's backwards. 700, 600, 550, 750, 800, 750, 840, 750, 700, 650, 600, 650, 520. It's just all over the place. It's maddening. Now you might ask why, and I'm not going to answer that question. What I'm going to answer is
Why?
What I'm going to answer is why not fix it? Why not fix it? Here's why. Because the contents of those books, by and large, overlap. And so if you were to try and put them in a book in perfect order, you still wouldn't be able to read it in perfect order. Because you'd get to the end of, book 16, and then you'd start book 17, but book 17 would start before book 16 ended. And you'd just be as lost as you were when it's like this.
Well, I'm lost now.
So the reason why it's so confusing is because these books were not all written at one time in one room, and all the authors sat down and said, okay, you write that part, I'll write this part, we'll stick it all together when we're done. It's not how it worked. These people wrote these books at different times in different countries. In some cases, they wrote them for different reasons. And God's the one who was guiding each and every author to write what they wrote. And so sometimes their story overlaps with someone else's story. Why? Because they were living in the same time. They were living through similar events. So really, the reason they're grouped like this is by theme. It's not grouped for time. It's not grouped for chronology. It's grouped for theme. Some of the chronology works. If you look at these books, they're mostly in order right here at the beginning, and then it starts to go haywire with 1st and 2nd Chronicles, and then it's all gone. After that, it's just... So, what I did was I rearranged them into chronological order, and so you can see how much overlap there is. You guys see how many books are overlapping? What we've got over here is creation, and we've got over here is the end of the Old Testament, about 400 years before the New Testament starts, about 400 years before Jesus comes on the scene. No, that's Malachi. I know, but if I raise the font size up, it overlaps with Nehemiah's words, and then that makes it even worse. It's easier just to make it tiny and tell you it's Malachi. That's all I got.
Wait, whoa, is that thin little thing what she's talking about?
That one?
Yeah.
That's Malachi.
I just
It's
now
the
saw
last book in the Old Testament, and it's the last book written in the Old Testament. It's one of the only ones that's exactly where it should be. You're in the live stream. You're doing it on purpose. I just got on. Has he been making faces at the camera when I wasn't looking?
Yep.
Darn it!
I'm shooting the camera.
Figures.
He's like secretly.
Ethan's like, it's my last day.
My God.
What's he gonna do?
He was like this.
Wait, he's getting out of here?
He's an 8th grader. Yeah, he's graduating
So
now.
am I.
Good
So
riddance.
am I.
Good
I'm a
riddance.
7th grader.
I wanted to fail, but Mom
So yeah,
said
8th graders. This is your last Sunday.
Bye-bye.
But you can come on Wednesday. That'll be your last Wednesday.
Yeah, when he says that
So, yeah, you guys get like a week overlap with all the 6th graders.
with him.
Yeah. And then after that, separate again. Okay, so we're gonna go as fast as we can, and instead of going one, bring it back, people. Close them mouths. If you got a real question, feel free to raise your hand and all that. But stop the little personal, private conversations with each other. It's group time. If you got something to say, it's got to be worthwhile to say to the whole group, or else just hold it for later. Is it for the whole group, Katie?
I like your shirt.
I'm a little disappointed. I can't be sorry.
I like your pants.
All right, so we're gonna go one time period at a time, and we're not gonna go one book at a time. So, first time period we're gonna focus in on is this big chunk at the beginning. It's not to scale with the rest of the timeline, okay? This is from around 6000 BC, probably around 6004 if we're gonna get real precise.
I'm gonna cry.
All right.
It's like pounding in my heart. Katie.
6004 BC up to 1500 BC. And this is all covered in the book of Genesis. The book of Genesis has the largest amount of time inside of it because it goes from creation all the way up to right before the Israelites are enslaved in Egypt. It's a really big chunk of story. And it tells it pretty quickly. It's a big book, don't get me wrong, but 50 chapters for several thousand years, that's actually moving at a pretty good pace. Genesis, several thousand years within its story. It's crazy. Now, a lot of those thousands go by in the first few chapters because people lived to close to 1,000 years in their life. Adam down to Noah's dad, they all lived, most of them, up into the 900s.
I got that.
That's crazy, right? Now, they still had kids at normal time. Like, they still had kids in their 20s and 30s, but they just kept having them. And that's how the human population goes from like 2 people to millions. Because you're not just going to have like 5 or 6 kids and be done. You're having kids for hundreds of years of your life.
You might have like 10, like.
You might have over 100 kids in that time.
So that's
and that's only having a kid like every 600 or 700 years. Or every.
Whoa.
No, wait, I said that wrong.
Every 6 or 7.
Every 6 or 7 years is what I meant to say. Every 6 or 7 years.
That sounds crazy.
But no, you really could. You really could have close to 1,000 kids in your lifetime.
Oh, jeez. You know what? That'd be painful. I'm out.
Woo!
No, what do you
That's an amazing thought process.
Next one.
Now, as far as we know, no one ever did. I'm just saying it was possible. I'm not saying it happened. There's no evidence to suggest it happened. I'm just saying the evidence says it could have. Yeah, Noah.
How many kids do you want to have?
Oh, that's a good question. I lean towards 3 because I grew up in a family of 3 kids. Ellie leans towards 4 because she grew up in a family of 4 kids.
Good luck, Daniel.
So,
good
yeah,
luck.
let's stop at 3.5.
Just wait. Just wait.
No, like this way. Not
Which half?
Which half are we doing here?
Which
All
one,
right.
the top or bottom?
Not the point, guys. All right. I enjoy the jokes. I really do. But we've got about 45 minutes to try and do half of a Bible. So we're going to try and slow the jokes down a smidge and just kind of ramp up our speed. Genesis starts out with these words, in the beginning, God. And that should set you up for the rest of the book. If you don't get anything out of today except for one thing, remember that the Bible is not a story about men and women. The Bible is the story of how God has interacted with humankind throughout the ages. So it's about God. He's the central character. He's the lead role. Everyone else that's in it, also important, but they're side characters. So they play important parts, but they enter the story and exit the story. The story is about God. He's the only character who never leaves the scene. He's always in the story. When you read a book and someone's name is the title, you don't expect them to leave halfway through and not be in the book anymore.
Wait, but the title is the Holy Bible.
Yeah, we kind of gave it that title. You know what a better title might be? History.
That would be awesome. And then I wouldn't read it.
It's his story.
His name is history.
So,
and it sounds like Holy.
We've got these events right here, and they're going to go all the way like this. Creation, Adam and Eve, Noah and the ark, Tower of Babel, family of Abram, kids of Abram, grandkids of Abram, great-grandkids of Abram, until eventually the great-grandkids are the beginning of an entire country. And that's all in Genesis, and that's thousands of years. Thousands of years. By the time you get to the end of the book, the family has now grown to over 70 people. in just this family of dad, I think one or two of the moms are still alive. There was like 4 moms in that family. And then, I know, it was a crazy family. 12 sons, unnumbered amounts of daughters. We don't know if it was a lot or a little. We have no clue how many daughters. And then those sons had enough kids that the total was over 70 people. It's a big family. You know when you get into a family reunion and you're like trying to remember how many cousins you have?
Actually,
70,000.
That's kind of where they were at. They're getting up there, they're going, you know what, we're darn near 100. Let's just round it off, you know? So now, that family, by the end of Genesis, they moved to Egypt. One of the brothers, the second youngest, his name was Joseph, at this point has been living in Egypt for a while. His brothers, when he was a kid, they were pretty mean to him. They always were ribbing him, or throwing him in pits and threatening to leave him there until he dies, or sell him as a slave. Good old times, right? So he ends up in Egypt as a slave and works his way up just by being honest and following God and doing real hard work whenever he's asked to. He becomes second in command of the entire country. From being a slave to second in command of the entire country. All because he just listened to God and did what was right in every situation.
Why?
That's ridiculous. He was wrongfully accused of trying to rape a man's wife. And because his character was so strong, the husband of that woman didn't actually believe the charge.
What?
This man, Joseph, was so honest, so upright, so strong in character, that this man didn't believe his own wife when Joseph was accused. That is a serious amount of character.
And you shouldn't believe.
Well, we know the story. He actually didn't try anything. She was trying to get him into bed, and he ran away.
Run? Wait, who
Physically ran away from her because
Wait,
he
who
didn't
ran
want to do
away?
anything mean to her. He didn't want to push her down. He didn't want to insult her. He didn't want to do anything mean to her.
Wait,
so
did
he
he,
just
like-
physically left.
I have a
Wait,
question.
who is
Did he
he?
like just run out of the
He's a
room?
slave. He's just Joseph.
He, Joseph?
He's a slave.
So,
Oh.
2 different Josephs.
that's
Oh,
nasty.
that person.
Yeah.
I want to hear about the coat part of it.
Yeah, it's all bad. But anyways, through that, and this is the crazy thing, God uses that horrible situation, that ridiculous circumstance, as the starting point that gets him to be second in command of the entire country. That is so weird to me that God can use that. But that's what God did. He took that situation and made it the turning point where Joseph stops going down and starts going up. Crazy that that's what would be the turning point. All right, so Joseph becomes second in command of the entire country. Joseph, through his actions in that position, he saves the lives of all the Egyptians. He saves the lives of all the neighboring countries by foreseeing through the king's dream the famine that was coming. He stores enough food for his own country and for countries surrounding them so they can then sell out the food as the famine goes on for 7 years. 7 years where there's no rain. 7 years where the crops are just dying. 7 years people survive on the wisdom of Joseph to store enough food away. That's pretty crazy. During that 7 years, who should come and ask for food? His brothers who sold him as slaves all those years back. And so he gets to test them and see if they are sorry that they sold him as a slave. After that, there's a family reunion. The whole family of over 70 people come and move to Egypt. And then suddenly the book ends right there as Joseph becomes an old man and dies. And so at the end of Genesis, all the lead characters, besides God, are dead. They've all died of old age. The whole family's living in a country that's not their own country. And you have no clue what's going to happen next. And everyone's dead. And then there's like a 64-year gap where the books don't happen. Nothing goes on. 64 years. And so when the books pick back up in Exodus, 64 years of stuff has happened, and Exodus tries to fill you in. And this is kind of how it goes. After Joseph, the second in command, dies, a little bit later, the Pharaoh dies. The guy who was first in command. And then a new leader rises up to be the next Pharaoh. And that Pharaoh doesn't know Joseph or Joseph's family of now many more than 70 people, as they kept on having babies and babies and babies. And so this new king looks at this group of foreigners that are just kind of like freeloaders in his land. They don't pay taxes, they get a choice spot, and he doesn't know why they're there. He never knew Joseph. He never knew what, Joseph did for the country, saved everyone's lives for 7 years straight, He doesn't know all that. And so he just looks at this big group of people and says, you know what I want? I want slaves. I decide right now you guys are all slaves. So he just turns this whole family of people into a family of slaves. And they're the king's personal workforce. Whatever he wants done, he just sends them out to do it. And if they don't like it, they get beat.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty messed up. Now that goes on for close to 64 years. And they keep having babies. They keep growing. But everyone who's born into the family is born a slave. And so the king likes it. Because with a family of slaves, you don't have a diminishing workforce. You have a growing workforce. Until eventually, in Exodus, we start to see there's so many of these people now, because God's blessing them even as the king is cursing them, that they're growing faster than the Egyptians are growing. Even as slaves, they're growing faster than the Egyptians are growing. The Egyptians are starting to get a little freaked out, and so they make their slavery worse and worse and worse to try and get the numbers to go down. It doesn't work, though. God keeps blessing them anyways. Around this time, a guy named Moses pops into the story. God uses Moses through some insane circumstances to save this family and to get them out of the country. It takes 80 years, though.
Wait, oh, wow.
80 years. Moses is born. 40 years later, he runs away from Egypt. 40 years after that, he returns to Egypt. So now he's an 80-year-old man, and that's when he finally goes and frees the people of Israel, as they're now called. That was great-great-great-great-grandpa's name God gave him. He was born Jacob, and God named him Israel. And so now they're called the children of Israel. Later just gets shortened to Israel. So Moses comes back through all these crazy, ridiculous plagues. Moses saves the people, gets them out of Egypt. They head off to the promised land, a place where God said, there's so many wicked people, there's so much evilness, I'm going to help you guys just wipe everything out. We're just going to clear the land, and you guys can have it. It'll be yours.
Wait, what?
That's what he tells them. He says, I've got this plot of land. It's set aside for you guys, and it's filled with so much evil. I'm just going to walk you through, and every battle you get into, every group of people that don't want to leave, you're just going to win automatically. You could send one guy in, you'd still win, because I'll be on your side. So they try and go there. They get there in like 2 years, and all the old fogies are like, yeah, that looks hard. I don't want to do it. And when I say old fogies, I mean like everybody from 20 up. They're all like, no, I don't want to do it. And so God's like, well, it's the promised land. Your kids want it. So I'm going to let you guys have it. But all you guys who don't want to follow me and obey what I just told you to do, you can't have it. So I'm not going to kill you, though, so I'll just wait till you die. Once you're all dead, then your kids can have it. So they actually spin their wheels, circle around in the desert for 40 years. Moses at this point is like, really, guys? I'm already like 80. Did we have to do the 40-year desert trek? Like, during the 40 years, Moses even breaks and disobeys God, and he loses his privilege to go into the promised land. So just before the 40 years are up, Moses dies.
Wait, so didn't he strike the rock or something?
Yeah. It's basically how it goes.
So he struck it twice.
Step one, God says, go strike the rock, and water will come out. So he does it. Years later, they want water again. They're in a place where there's no water. And God's like, hey, go talk to the rock. And Moses goes over, and he's just had it with the people. It's been a bad day. And he goes over to the rock, and he just beats it with his stick instead of talking to it.
He just beats it with his stick.
Well, this is a big deal. It's not just some rock. God was actually setting up a type for them, saying that Jesus Christ shall be your rock, your foundation, and he will give you living water. There was this whole message, this whole lesson that's supposed to go along with the rock gives you water thing. It wasn't just like a random miracle. So when Jesus dies on the cross, that was symbolic of him being beaten. So that's only supposed to happen once. The first time. The second time you go to Jesus, you just talk to him. You ask for his forgiveness. You ask for his water. You ask for his help. And so when Moses goes back the second time and just beats him anyways, then God's like, dude, you messed up my symbol. That's not what the lesson was supposed to be. Dude. You don't go kill Jesus on the cross a second time.
Bro.
He only hangs on the cross once. So, yeah, Moses kind of messed that one up. Anyways, Moses writes his 4 other books while he's out in the desert in those 40 years. And it goes back and forth. Exodus, storybook, plot line, series of events. Then it takes a break, and you get into the book of Leviticus. Leviticus. There's a few stories in there, but they're like little nuggets. A lot of it is just law. It's just how to live your life, what to do. And then you flip back again. Numbers, that's the 40 years in the desert. The experience of camping for 40 years straight. And then you take a break again and you go back to Deuteronomy. And Deuteronomy, that is literally like a month of sermons all put into one book. Moses just wrote down his sermons that he was going to give to the people of Israel right before he dies. And he puts them all in a book so they can keep them with him, or keep them with them after he's dead. So, that's those books. At this point, Moses dies right before they're about to go into the land. Via, hands to yourself. Real simple. Sorry, you're going to Olivier now?
I've never gone
She's
via.
never going via. Everybody that
You can't lie to
said
me.
that to her, she gets so mad at them.
You're wrong, because for years I called you Olivia and you would correct me and say, it's Via.
No, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't.
For years.
I have a question.
For years.
No, I wouldn't.
You can't call me wrong on this one. It's a very clear memory in my head.
It's legit, I promise.
Alright, go.
Is evilness a real word? Because you said it earlier. And
Yeah, evilness is a real word. It's not a made up one. I make up a lot of words. That's not one of them.
Is F plus real?
Tell us the word
No.
that you made up.
Adultish.
I took a test.
To be
and I
like
got
an adult.
F+.
I failed double.
He's like,
Plus.
Yes.
My 2%.
Barely next. How did
3%.
How did Moses write Genesis?
I'm gonna go around these legs.
Job?
I watched Eric
Moses? What? Oh, as a slave. Yeah, Joseph. Yeah.
How did he test his brother?
Oh, he pretended he wasn't himself. Spoke through an interpreter. He only spoke in Egyptian. And then an interpreter would translate to his brother's own native language, which I think was either Aramaic or Hebrew. I don't know. And so then they didn't ever get to hear him speak his own language. They didn't think it was him. He was wearing all Egyptian stuff because he's royal Egyptian now. So he's not wearing their kind of clothes. And they haven't seen him for years. Years. So they don't know what he looks like anymore. And so he's standing right in front of them. And what he does is tries to pit them against each other and see what they'll do if one brother's in trouble. If one brother's in trouble, will they do everything to save him, sacrifice their lives, lay down their own selves to try and save that brother? Or will they just ditch him? That was the test. And then he sets up the brother he picks on to be the test brother. He convicts him of a crime he didn't commit. So he puts him in a situation where the brothers think that he has forsaken them. And then he watches to see what the other brothers will do. Will they act as a family? Will they stand up for their brother? Or they'll be like, dude, you messed up. We don't care about you anymore. And during that whole time, while he's doing the test, he actually overhears conversations that they don't think he can understand. Because they're speaking their language, they don't think he can hear them and know what they're saying. And he hears them saying to each other, this is all God's justice for what we did to our brother all those years ago. We're so they're apologizing to each other. I can't believe we did that to Joseph all those years ago. And so he can tell from their own private conversations that they don't think he can hear that they really are sorry for what they did. So he figured it out. He was very crafty in all of it because the punishment was all fake. Supposedly one brother was thrown in prison, was going to be beaten, and that's what the brothers thought. Really? He just had him taken back to his house. He got to stay in the royal palace. So they think he's suffering in jail, and he's just hanging out with rich people, eating rich food.
Yeah, sure, I'll go to jail.
Jail. But they didn't know. They really thought he was in darkest, deepest dungeon, being punished every day. They had no clue. It was a pretty sweet test. All right, people, back on track. Moses dies. We start Joshua's book. Joshua is the successor to Moses. He's the new leader of the country. Joshua is told by God, you're going to lead the people in a very military sense. You're going to lead them as an army through the land that will one day be called Israel. At this point, it's just called Canaan. And you're going to conquer all the people. They can leave, give them the option if they want. They can just get up and go, and they can walk out free and clear, no battle, no fuss, no muss, no death, just go.
No death?
Or they refuse, you can kill them. Why was this okay? Well, God picked this piece of land intentionally because the people in it knew about God, knew who God was, what he commanded, what he requested and required, and they flat out denied it. They flat out said, no, we don't want to. We don't want to worship God. We don't want to obey God's rules. We don't want to do what God says. And God gave them several 100 years to change their minds, and they said no. So God said, okay, well, now you guys can have the land. You'll follow me. They won't. Just get them out. So they go through and they kick everyone out. God actually gave them very specific rules on how to clear the land, on what to do, on where to send them, on what to do if they don't want to go. And they didn't actually follow all the rules. They didn't actually do what they were told. And so instead of a punishment, they just get consequences. God basically said all these people have fake made-up gods, little portable wooden statues or gold statues and stuff. And if you don't get them out, those practices, those fake religions are going to stick around, and later on they will infect your culture. And you guys are going to start worshiping little pocket statues, and you guys are going to start sacrificing your children to an idol on a barbecue.
How do you know that?
Well, God told him, I'm not going to make this happen. I'm just forewarning you. If you get rid of all the idols, that gets rid of a lot of your problems later on. If you leave the people here that have these made-up gods, those made-up gods will cause you grief later on. And sure enough, they didn't get rid of all of them. And it caused some serious problems later on.
Wait, so I was right. This is the time that they sacrifice babies?
It's a little later, but this is why. This is
always wrong.
This is when they didn't get rid of the people that were already sacrificing babies. And then later on, they start falling into the trap and they start sacrificing babies.
Who killed babies?
Super messed up. Dude, false religions can get you to do some messed up stuff.
Did you say folks?
False.
False.
religion.
What?
They worship this thing in the South called chicken and waffles.
Alright, so, if you want to know more about that, it's the god called Baal. And he is totally made up, but Satan had a really good time helping people make up that one. Because Baal likes when you sacrifice children, not just babies. Like, any human sacrifice supposedly pleases Baal. And so, this is where it got really weird. It was kind of 50% fake religion, we're going to worship this god we made up, but 50%, I can get anyone I don't like killed.
What?
All I have to do is knock them out, bring them to the temple, and say, here's a sacrifice for Baal.
That's wrong.
And people liked that, because it was basically government-sanctioned murder. You could just go take someone you don't want around, have them killed by the priests, and then, you know, like maybe it was your neighbor, you didn't like your neighbor or something. Or maybe you had a disobedient child, you're like, yeah, let's go kill him. People liked the religion because they could get murder done and not get punished.
Why is it going around town?
Do you have to like go get permission first?
It's just
like,
called
I
murder.
don't like this person.
Can I kill him? Call him murder.
All right. So Joshua's story happens. It's pretty short on the timeline. Then we get into a period called the Judges. Judges last for a few. Judges last for a few hundred years, and Judges follows a cycle. It's the same thing about 14 times over. And this is kind of the way it shakes out. You're following God, everything's great, everyone loves God, so the life of the country goes pretty darn well. Everyone starts to think, you know, everything's going pretty good. I wonder why we need God. I mean, why we need help? I mean, everything's fine. Stop following God, stop worshiping God, don't really talk to him or talk about him. Suddenly things aren't going so well anymore. Things are kind of starting to go wrong. And hey, look at that. All of our neighbors have really big armies and they don't like us and they're starting to hurt us a lot and steal stuff from us. And hey, God, maybe you could help us out. I remember my grandpa was talking about how you can help people out. Can you help us again? God sends a judge, this person who comes and says, hey, this is how we should live. This is how we should operate. This is why we worship God, because he protects us when we do. And then everyone goes back to God and starts worshiping God. And the judge leads an army and they kick out all the people where they're coming in and stealing stuff. And everything starts to go better again.
They go back down. And then
wow, we're following God. Everything's great. Everything's grand. And man, everything's great. Why do we need God again? I don't think we need God. Everything's fine. And then we stop following God. Everything's not so great. This just keeps happening. 14 times this happens. Now each half is about 20 years long. It's about a generation. Okay? So about 40 years and you've gone around the whole wheel. And the way it shakes out is, like let's say your parents are all following God, then you guys would all refuse to follow God. Everything would go horrible. Someone would rise up from the next generation. Your kids would rise up. They would lead everyone back to God. And then they would all follow God for a generation, but then their kids would grow up and think, well, everything's fine. You don't need God to make everything fine. And then during that generation, everything falls apart. And then the next generation's like, wow, everything sucks. We should follow God again. And this just keeps happening. Every generation, it's every other. One generation doesn't follow God, one generation does follow God. One generation doesn't follow God, one generation does follow God. Back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Yes.
Question, what do you live stream this on?
YouTube.
Oh.
Yeah, but what's your channel name?
I'm Cuneo, because Cuneo's my last name.
Cuneo, spell that for me.
IMCUNEO.
How many people watch it?
Like while it's live, not many. Some people go back and watch it after.
How many? What's your type? How many views do you get like a day? Like.
Not very many.
10. I got 10.
Seriously, who wants to watch 45 minutes of a guy talking? I mean, come on.
I mean, when you hear all this background noise.
Alright,
This one is
yeah.
probably funny.
Viral.
You need to hear all the funny things back.
I don't even remember. But more than a year.
Can we start YouTube?
You could go.
Can we start vlogging?
Yeah.
YouTube, what's up? Wait.
If you raise your hand, you can talk. If you don't raise your hand, shush. Yes.
Plenty of people actually still do that today, except for in one generation. Like one person will have, their life will be fine, so they stop following God, and then something terrible will happen, and then they'll start following Him again until they're good, and it still happens.
Yeah, no, it can happen multiple times in the same person's life. They get, it's the word called complacent. Complacent means you don't think too much about stuff. When everything's going fine, you don't think about God, because the only way you remember to think about Him is when everything's not going fine. And this happens in culture, but it also happens in people. And in culture, it's a little slower. The wheel moves slower. And people can move a lot quicker. And in some people, it only happens once, because the bad stuff that happened was so insanely bad that the memory of it lasts the whole lifetime. Sometimes if the bad thing wasn't that bad, they might lose God quicker, because the memory doesn't stick with them as good. So, and that's why with culture it goes so slow, because cultural memories are very strong. But still they don't last forever somehow. They still go away. It's ridiculous, but they do. Alright, yeah.
Can I put this back?
Yeah, you can.
No.
Yeah, Katie.
You're so mean to me, you know why? Because I can't be here next week for the other half of it.
But it's live streamed on the internet, so you can just go watch it later.
But I can't be on the internet at my mom's.
Ha,
Well,
sucker.
it's not going to suddenly get deleted if you miss it for a week.
Don't be mean, you little.
Alright.
With you.
Judges starts here in the 1300s BC, but it goes on for several hundred years. And what's interesting about this, if you go through all the judges, not every judge gets a big long story. Some judges get like a third of a chapter. Some judges get more than a whole chapter. Just depends on what judge it is and how many details are even in their story. But what you'll notice if you go through the whole book, and the book isn't even that long, really. I mean, in chapter count, it's pretty short. What you'll notice is the judges keep getting worse. You see, God at the beginning of the book of Judges goes to the nation and picks out like the best person he can find, the one who's following God the closest. And that person's like a really godly person. But as time goes on and the cycle repeats, he has a worse pool to draw from. Until eventually he's not picking a godly man, he's picking whoever he can find. He's picking, you know, well, you'll do. Instead of, wow, you're amazing, it's, okay, I guess this will work. You're good enough. Until eventually the last judge, the one many of us are most familiar with, I don't even know why God picked him. I can't seem to figure it out. He picked Samson. Samson doesn't do the right thing except by accident. He never decides to do the right thing. He never says, oh yeah, that's what God wants, that's what I'll do. He says, what do I want? That's what I'll do. And the only times he ever fights God's enemies, the only time he ever leads the people is kind of by accident. Just because, you know what? I'm angry today. I'll kill a bunch of people and, hey, what do you know? It was the enemy.
Wait, who gets angry and kills a bunch of people?
Samson.
Oh, yeah.
And it just happens to be the bad guys that he kills. It's not like he was even trying to kill the bad guys. Those were just the ones who made him upset.
Wait, he was testing his strength though, and he went,
That's a different part of the story. I mean, like, one day people are mean to him, so he, like, kills a bunch of them. Or, you know, lights a bunch of flaming twigs and then ties them to foxes' tails and then lets the foxes go and burns all the enemy's crops. Or, like, you know, he hears these guys in town don't like him and they want him dead. So he's like, okay. He goes in their town, grabs the town gates, and lifts them off the ground and just runs away with the town gates.
wait, why does he take it out of your box?
And then they can't lock up their town at night because they don't have gates anymore. And they go find them, and they're out on some hill like a few miles away. And they're just like, how did our gates get out here? And then he fights them. It just takes like a bone off the ground and just like kills thousands of them. Because he's upset. He's not a good guy. But this is the thing. God's goal was to take the few Israelites who wanted to follow him and save their lives. And so what he does is he takes a guy like Samson, who really makes no sense to pick, except that what God needs to get done is get rid of the bad guys who are killing the good guys. And even though Samson, I can't even call him a good guy, he was pretty good at killing bad guys. And so God, that does not deserve applause. Yeah! I'm sorry, it does not.
Let's go. Does that mean he killed himself? No.
He did. He did in the end. It was still by mistake, kind of. So at the end, God's taken away his miraculous strength. His hair's been chopped off. His eyes have been poked out. He's chained between two pillars. And the leaders of the whole group of bad guy countries are all at this big party in this one big building. And he's there, and he can hear all the leaders of the nation around him, all the bad guys who are in charge. And he prays to God, and he says, God, can you give me my strength back just one last time? And God's like, okay. You actually talked to me. You actually prayed for once. Sure. I'm waiting for that your whole life. And so he gives him his strength back, and all he has to do is go, and he pulls the columns out. And these just happen to be the center columns of the entire structure.
Why would they tie him to there?
Because he was powerless at this point. They thought they had figured out that cutting his hair would take away his power. And they're mysticists. They're you know, what's the word?
But this is
they're
the
pagans.
Why do they?
They don't think God's imbuing him with strength.
They could attach
They think his long hair is what gives him his strength. So if his hair's cut, he can't have power.
This is the thing. They could attach them to any of that.
That is true. But when you're having a party and you bring out your prize trophy prisoner, you don't put him off in the corner. You put him where everyone can see him.
What?
That's stupid.
They're showing off Samson because Samson was an enemy for years that no one could ever defeat. So when they've got him with his eyes plucked out with no strength, they're not going to tie him up in the corner. It's a big party. They want to show off how powerful they are.
Did they put a bag over his head and like use a punching bag?
No, they put his
I
eyeballs.
don't know. Anyways, he pulls the building down. He kills himself. But in his last moments, he actually does what God wanted the whole time. Gets rid of the bad guys. He kills all their leaders right there and then on the last day. Now, end of Judges. Oh yeah, by the way, Ruth happens during the book of Judges. We don't know exactly where because we don't know how old she was when her story happened. We don't know how old her husband was when the story happened. But we do know how many generations before King David she was. So we have like a range where we can set her story. We're not exactly sure exactly when, but she's like within that box somewhere on the timeline. Ruth's story, very cool. Go and read it. God is not xenophobic. God is not like no foreigners because I don't like foreigners. He says no foreigners if they worship false gods. If they want to actually become worshipers of the true and living God, bring them in. I love them. But Ruth is one of the only people who ever fell into that category. She was a foreigner who saw the difference between the fake made-up gods and the real God that Israel had. And she fell in love with that God. And so God welcomed her in, and she actually became part of the bloodline of King David, part of the bloodline of Jesus Christ. It's pretty cool. So, second time that actually happened, there was another instance back in Joshua where a foreigner becomes part of the bloodline of Jesus Christ. Pretty sweet stuff. All right, we get to the end of Judges, Samson being like one of the last judges there. We transition to the era of kings. At this point, God is leading the nation. They're doing a pretty good job because now they have these like prophets. And they're kind of like our modern day judges where once you become a prophet, you're kind of a prophet for the rest of your life. And so they have this really cool prophet named Samuel. And he was doing a really good job of leading the country. And the country does that thing again where it's like, yay, God. And, hey, who needs God? And once they get around the wheel this time, Samuel's trying to bring them back around. And he's doing pretty good until the country starts to get this idea in its head. They're looking around at all the other countries, and they're seeing that the other countries have kings. And they're like, well, we don't have a king. We want a king. Well, up to this point, God has been functioning as their king, and that's the best their lives have ever been, is when God was king. Hey, can you guys, like, stop doing whatever it is that's distracting everyone to laugh at you?
Sorry.
Thanks. That. So they go to Samuel. Samuel's like, are you guys crazy? Do you guys know what kings do? Kings like sit in their palaces and just demand, and you have to do it. Like they just take all your sons and put them in their army. Like you don't get a choice in this. They take all your money and call it taxes. You don't get a choice in this.
What if he's not
They take your daughters and just say, I want another wife. And you don't get a choice in this. That's what I'm saying. So Samuel warns them. He says, guys, when God's your king, when God's your king, none of that stuff happens. But if you want a human to be your king, that stuff's going to happen. And he warns them, and they're like, yeah, we don't care. Okay. So the first king they get is chosen because he checks all the boxes for what a human would want in a king. He's tall, he's strong, he's handsome, he can fight good. He has that voice where he talks and everyone's just like, yeah, right on, that, I want to do that, yes. He's like that natural leader kind of guy. He's suave, he's kind of smart, but he's that prideful, I'm really sure of myself kind of smart, where he doesn't really ask for advice all that often. This comes back to bite him.
Sounds wonderful.
So, everyone likes him. He does pretty good at first. The longer he's king, the worse he gets. Eventually, he's just flat out disobeying God, doing whatever he feels like. And then he goes to war when God didn't tell him to, and he loses and decides to kill himself so that the enemy can't capture and torture him.
Yeah.
It's a bad story by the end of it. Now, that was the human favorite king. So he had all the qualities that a human would look for. God picks the next king, and he chooses the next king based on what he would look for. This is King David. He's in 1 Chronicles and 2 Samuel. So King David, humble guy, simple guy, just a little farm boy. He's a shepherd. He doesn't have ideas of grandeur. He doesn't want to be king. He just loves God. God had different boxes to check. He wanted someone who puts God first in their life. He wanted someone who wants to protect instead of control. That's the kind of king God wanted. Someone who looks out for you, not tries to control you. So God picks David. And for a long time, David does amazing as king. A long time. I mean, he has to fight to be king, but that's a whole nother story. I recommend you read it. It's pretty fantastic. Now, 2 Samuel and 1 Chronicles. This is our first serious overlap because they both tell the exact same story. The exact same story. Why would this be? Why would there be two books in the Bible with the same plot line?
Which two are those?
2 Samuel, 1 Chronicles. They're the same book practically. They're written at different times. It's a different perspective. 2 Samuel is written more like a journal. It's kind of written as it's happening. This happens, then this happens, then this happens, and then I went there and I did this. And it's likely written by Samuel's successor. There's like two guys that fall in that category. 1 Samuel, definitely written by Samuel. But 2 Samuel's kind of after Samuel dies, so not much chance there. So, 2 Samuel, 1 Chronicles. 1 Chronicles was written as a history book hundreds of years later about that period of history. So 1 Chronicles, that was written like way out here about that time in history. So it's the same story from two perspectives. One's as it's happening, one's way after it happened. After you get past the life of David, then you get into his son, who's the next king, Solomon. Wisest guy who ever lived, probably the richest king who's ever been a king. And he actually wrote 3 books himself. So the blue books here, Song of Solomon, Ecclesiastes, Proverbs, those are books about being wise that Solomon writes. Being the wisest guy in the world, you know, he has some credentials to do that. The books under it, the green ones, 2 Chronicles and 1 Kings, are about Solomon, not by Solomon. So they tell his story of his life. So some books he wrote, #1 bestsellers. Some books about him, very fun to read. Yes.
Okay, so there's 1st and 2nd Chronicles. I don't get it. Is there like 2 Chronicles of Narnia?
Actually, it's weirder than that. 1st and 2nd Chronicles were originally one book.
What? So
We
Narnia
split
was
them up.
one thing, and then it became 2.
We split them up ourselves
I have 7.
so that you would know where the overlap starts and ends. So that you would know 2 Samuel overlaps with this portion of Chronicles. We broke Chronicles in half intentionally.
I don't see Chronicles.
1st and 2nd Samuel is broken in half, Because First and Second Samuel have different authors. They were originally one book, but the first half was written by Samuel. The second half was written by Samuel's successor.
What is that the same like with Kings too?
I'm not as clear on Kings. Let me think about that for a second. Kings is broken up by who's sitting on the throne.
Yeah.
And so Kings, in First Kings, is all about the last king who ruled the whole country, and the first two kings that each got to rule half of the country. It's about the split, because the country breaks in half.
So it should have been like First Kings, first and a half kings, and then two kings.
Yeah, so it's like kind of broken up by the way the story goes.
First 2.5 kings.
Too much talking, guys. We're not gonna get to finish on time. I gotta stop wasting time shushing you if we're actually gonna get through the end of this.
Where's First Chronicles on there? I don't see it.
First Chronicles is tiny. Second Samuel's tiny. I just couldn't fit the words any bigger because the chunk of time is so small. These basically are only about David, and so that's why they're so short in time, because it's just one guy's life. So it's pretty short.
That's weird because like one of them's short and then one of them's like super long.
And that's because of what's contained within it. We broke it up ourselves. Also, there's a bit of a cheat here. I didn't want to put it on here because it would be really hard to do. First Chronicles is a weird book in that it doesn't start at David, even though it's about David. First Chronicles, because remember, it's a history book, right? It's a history book written way out here about that. So it starts, I kid you not, at creation and does like this fast version of catching you up. It starts at creation and tells the whole story from creation down to David. In fast, speedy form. Like, big events. And then he comes in halfway through the book, and then it slows down and just goes at normal pace. So First Chronicles is pretty long, but only the second half of First Chronicles is actually all about David. The first half of First Chronicles is getting you there from creation. You have to get there really quickly. So, and the reason for this is, it was written way out here at a point when most of the country forgot their history. So he writes a book to remind them, here's your history.
How long did it take them to write Psalms? Because that's like all of them.
It's a very special book. We'll get to that one
Like
last.
not all of them, but it's
Very special book. All right. So, during this period, Solomon, he's a cool king. Everything goes pretty good. He's not perfect, though. And by the time he dies, instead of it going to his son like it should have, the country splits in half. The north, 10 tribes, and the south, 2 tribes, because there's 12 total. His son gets to keep track of the bottom 2, and they're the ones that have the most success with God. They've got like a third of their kings are actually good, are actually following God. 2/3 are bad. The northern 10 tribes, 100% bad. Not a single good king for the rest of their history. It's just bad after bad after bad after bad after bad. It's terrible. Each one gets about 12 kings before things really shake up. During this next period, as they're going through one bad king after another bad king, God starts to do another new thing to try and get his people back on track, to try and keep them going the right way. Why is God so concerned with this single country, by the way? Does anyone figure it out yet?
Huh?
Because he could have picked any country. He could have done this with every country. He's God. He can be in many places at once. Why does he just pick Israel and just go with Israel the whole time?
Because he picked the other. Why couldn't he pick
Because he picked the other side.
Israel's his favorite.
He's going with the.
What's special about Israel?
They're
Well, that's like me saying strawberries are special because I like strawberries.
It's still the same name after all this time.
Pizza special.
Olivia snorted.
That's nice. Some of these are good ideas. None of them so far that I've heard, and maybe it's just too loud. None of them were the right idea. It's because God wanted to bring Jesus onto the earth, and these are the people he knew he could do it through. He knows the future. He knows what's going to happen. He picked the Israelites because he knew it would work with the Israelites.
Oh, I said it right.
That doesn't mean it would be easy with the Israelites. That doesn't mean it was going to be automatic that, he just asked them to and they do it. He just knew with the Israelites, it actually stood a chance of working. He's actually going to get to bring forth his son, his ultimate expression of love and forgiveness through the Israelites. And this is why he tries so hard to keep them on the right track, so hard to protect them, so hard to keep them from just melting and falling apart. Guys, throughout all of human history, no people group has ever stayed together this long.
People group? What about
People group.
alien group?
Well, I have to say people group because the word country hasn't always existed.
People group.
If you go back far enough in history, country didn't exist.
And really weird people.
That was a concept we invented eventually.
I like people.
There was states. Before that, there was only cities. Like your people group was just your city. So I mean, things changed throughout history. But this people group, this family turned nation turned country, stays together longer than anything else on the planet. And it's only because God's been working with them. That's it. If God wasn't keeping them together, they wouldn't have lasted as long as they lasted. Think about this, guys. They became a group somewhere around the 2000s BC. They became a group, a chosen people of God, somewhere around the 2000s BC. And they're still a nation on this planet today, over 4,000 years later.
They weren't together for like 1,000 years at that time.
Together is a loose term.
Since they got broken
They
up.
still know who they were. They still knew where their land was. They didn't cease to exist. They just didn't get to live in their land. It's still them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's pretty amazing. Now, their family line, you could trace all the way back to Adam. That's a little unfair as contests go. Then it's truly unparalleled. No one's even close. If you're going to start with Adam and go all the way down, it's not even close. No one else can even compare. But, because that's all of history. If you start with Adam, then it's literally from creation to today. It's everything. You can't beat that. It's been God's chosen people that whole time. That's amazing. So, what he's doing here... They're doing the same thing again. They're going through the cycle, except now instead of it being like every 20 years things change, it's like every few years things get worse. And occasionally 2 tribes in the southern half, they get a good king for a few years and things get better. But then it's another bad king after that and things just keep getting worse. And throughout this period, God keeps sending in these red and purple books up here, the prophets. All those red and purple ones are from the major or the minor prophets. Anyone know the difference between a major and a minor?
Yep.
What is it?
Wait, no.
What makes a major prophet a major prophet? What makes a minor prophet a minor prophet? Yeah. It's how many pages are in their book. That's it. That's all there is. There's nothing actually different about a minor prophet and a major prophet. One isn't more important than the other. It's literally that the 5 major prophets have longer books and the 12 minor prophets have shorter books. That's all it is.
Why do they have shorter books?
They had less to say.
Ezekiel is shorter than Micah.
Ezekiel is way longer than Micah. These are time spans, how long they were a prophet for. The book length is not reflected on the timeline. It's
Wake
not.
up!
The size of the word and how long they were a prophet
That's
for.
funny. He knows.
That's what the timeline shows you. It doesn't show you how big the book is. You have to look in your Bible to see that one. So Lamentations is the exception. If you check me on this, Lamentations is very short, but it's written by the same guy as Jeremiah. And together they are way longer than any of the minor prophets. Lamentations is only like 5-6 chapters. It's pretty short. But it's like part 2 of his first book, which was already huge. So, all right. So during this time, bad king, bad king, bad king. Prophets come around and they basically just say, "Hey guys, God's doing something special right now. He's not going to punish you immediately for what you're doing wrong. He's going to give you a very long time to repent, a very long time to turn. But because He's giving you extra time to repent, you have to understand that if you don't repent by the time limit, your punishment will be that much worse."
Are they in a timeout?
Eventually, yeah. Eventually, it's exactly what their punishment is. You see, God said, every 70 years, I want you to take an entire year. Or no, wait, did I get it wrong?
7 years.
Sorry.
Jeez,
Every 49 years, the 50th year, you're supposed to take off.
What?
It's a crazy thing.
I'm sorry. What?
Yeah, 7 sevens. 49. 49. So then the 50th is a special year. You take the whole year off. It's a vacation year. It's very special. And the reason it's that many years apart, so you don't get too many in one lifespan. It's something you're actually looking forward to. It's the one jubilee you might live to see. And you're not even supposed to farm. You're not even supposed to farm.
What if you can't afford to school?
It's pretty crazy. Or is that every 7? I'm messing up the math. I was doing it so bad right now. I'm so sorry, guys. So,
Every some odd amount of years.
I am messing it up. Let me think this through real quick. It's every 7 years. Yep. Every 7 years, you give the crops, you give the land a rest. You don't farm. They didn't do this. They avoided taking any breaks for 490 years.
Why?
Which means
That their break
they
was-
missed 70 of the years off.
So they had to take a break for 70 years?
They had to take a 70-year timeout. It's literally how the punishment worked. God said, let the land rest every 7 years. They didn't do it for 490 years, which means there were 70 years that they owed the land. And so God literally has them kidnapped by their enemies and taken out of the land, and they don't get to farm the land for 70 years.
But what if they drank too many Big Gulps?
No, that you're messing up the math again. No 11s. There are no 11s.
Darn it!
All right, so bad kings, prophets, bad kings, prophets, bad kings, prophets.
Fail.
Armies come and ransack the entire country and kidnap everyone and lead them away as slaves.
Yay!
The time finally ran out. They finally hit the 490th year. God says no more waiting. The northern kingdom gets attacked by Assyria, kidnapped, taken out of their land. Southern kingdom gets attacked by Babylon, kidnapped, taken out of their land. They stay that way for 70 years. A lot of the people who went to Assyria did not get back. Almost everyone who went to Babylon did get back. Why? Well, because during the 490 years, the southern kingdom was the one who followed God the most. So they got more kind of grace in that 70 years than the northern kingdom got. So the punishment fit the crime. Follow God more, punishes you less. It's pretty cool. All right, so get to the end here, and then you get into these books a lot of us forget about. Ezra, Esther, Nehemiah. These books are the narrative, the storyline of the end of the Old Testament. They're what's actually at the ending story-wise. Because the books are so out of order in your Bible, though, a lot of people don't know where the end of the story actually is, because those books are not at the end of the Old Testament. They're somewhere around the middle of the Old Testament. But that's the end of the story of the Old Testament. I know, a little weird. They just toss all the prophets at the end and it messes up the timeline. So, Livia, you can move. Pick another seat. I'm fine with that. If she's distracting, get away from her. But don't be a distraction yourself. Alright.
Come sit with me, Olivia.
So now, we're at the end of the story, and what happens is, Babylon, who has that southern kingdom captive, they get conquered. The Medo-Persians come in and take over their entire empire, and this is really cool, little fun fact for your history class one day. The first king to be the king of Persia and the Medes, who takes over Babylon, is King Cyrus. And you'll learn about him in a normal history class, King Cyrus. But this is what's so cool. In Isaiah, you can actually read, God wrote Cyrus a letter. Think about that for a second. In Isaiah, God wrote Cyrus a letter.
Before I was born.
Cyrus?
And Cyrus is born out here in the story.
Cyrus?
Cyrus, King Cyrus of the Medo-Persians, gets a letter from God one day. And it's been written for over 100 years. He reads the letter, or the letter's read to him. He hears when it was written. And because God knew his name and who he was before he was even born, he immediately believes in God and decides to let God's people go. And the people of God start this exodus backwards to their home country again. After 70 years of being slaves, they get to go home. And they get to set their country back up. And God says, this time, guys, rebuild the temple, rebuild your nation, follow me, and soon the Messiah will come to save the whole planet. And what do you think? Do you think they do it?
No.
Rebuild the temple, rebuild the country, follow God? And yeah, not even close. They get home and they get so absorbed in rebuilding their homes and their farms, they don't even build the temple at first.
Well,
they just have all the temple supplies kind of sitting there like, we'll get to it. We'll get to it. And someone will say, yeah, we should build the temple, guys. Like, yeah, well, my wall's not really done yet around my house. I haven't really finished that barn I wanted to raise. We'll get to it later. We'll get to it later. We'll get to it later. And through all of these events, they do eventually build the temple, but they never actually stick with God. And so for over 400 years, there is a pause in your Bible, a silence from Malachi, the last prophet, somewhere around 430 BC, up until somewhere around 4 BC when Jesus is born. There's just this kind of nothingness where God's like, well, guys, I'm here waiting for you. Come follow me. Come follow me. By the time Jesus gets on the scene, what has happened is not disobeying God, walking away from God the normal way, let's go worship a bunch of idols. Not following God, doing things right, actually obeying him, somewhere in the middle. They've started up this tradition of making it look like they're obeying God, making it look like they're worshiping God, making it look like they love God. Looking like it. Just pretending. And so now there's no false idols of little wooden statues and things. They actually go to the temple. They actually do the sacrifices. They actually are doing the things. But Malachi tells you before the period even starts, God hates all the things they're doing. The way they're obeying him, the way they're celebrating God's holidays, God's like, I hate it. It's garbage. Because your hearts aren't in it. You guys don't actually mean it. You don't love me. You just want to make sure you don't get hurt by outside armies. You don't love me. You just want to make sure I'm pleased. And so God says, I'm just going to be quiet now. And eventually the silence breaks with John the Baptist and Jesus coming on the scene. And that's where we're going to pick up next week when we get into the New Testament. So, there you go. Several thousand years of history, all in a day. More than half your Bible by page count, at least.
Can't leave me on a cliffhanger like that.
Oh, cliffhanger of all cliffhangers. Yeah, so, what's the point of the whole Old Testament? Look at it like this, guys. God wants so desperately to save your soul. So desperately to save all of humankind that he's willing to go through all that. People who disobey him, say that they hate him, are not going to listen to him, no matter how many times he saves their butts, no matter how many times he rescues them, no matter how many times he brings them back from the brink, they're still walking away from him again and again and again. But he goes through it all so that he can save them in eternity. So that he can make a way for your soul to be saved. So he can make a way for eternal life to be possible. So he can make a way for sins to be forgiven. See, all of that was small potatoes to him. Those are all things he was fully willing to do. The biggest sacrifice was still yet to come. The biggest sacrifice is on the pages of the New Testament as he lays down his own life for his people, for us. That's all going to be next week. But the Old Testament is meant to show you guys that God has had a plan from the beginning. There was no point where God's like panicking and he's like, oh, how do I save everyone? I don't know how to do this. God had a plan the whole time. But working with humans was a choice he made, and that is a slow process. That is not quick. So when he's working with us, he can't just send Jesus the next day. It takes a while to get us to get to the right place. Several thousand years, in fact. But once he finally got humanity to the right spot, once he finally got his nation to the right spot, he sends Jesus without delay. He's ready at that point. So, next week we'll get to look into that and what it means and how the church got it started and what was happening in the church in the very early days. But I just wanted you guys to see God's plan and the way the Old Testament links up with Christianity. Because I think a lot of times we look at the Old Testament as like fun Bible stuff that really doesn't matter that much. And that's not really the case. You see, God reveals himself and his plan in the Old Testament, and then he reveals himself and the final plan in the New Testament. So it's kind of like two halves to a whole. It's the setup and then the execution. And when I say execution, I don't mean killing a person. I mean the go, that we're doing it now. And so in the Old Testament, he's setting up for the plan, and in the New Testament, he's doing the plan. So, awesome stuff. We're going to pray now, then it's time to get out of here. We did it a little bit late, so, don't stick around too long. Go find your parents when we're done. Lord, we thank you for your Old Testament, for all the things you teach us through it. Not just history lessons, Lord, but your heart, your plan, who you are and how you work. We thank you, Lord, that we get to know you that well, that we don't have to guess or get it by word of mouth, that you've written it down, you've preserved it for us. So that if we want to know more about you, we can just open up your book and find out. And we ask, Lord, that you would put a fire in us, something that makes us yearn to open your book and find out about you. Help us, Lord. Give us the strength, give us the wisdom to actually make the time to read your book and then to be able to understand what we read. Help us, Lord, to get close to you through your word and to know what your story is actually about. We ask, Lord, that we would see the Old Testament through that lens of what your son did on the cross. How hard it was for you to get your son to die in our place, that you had to work to die for us. Lord, you're amazing, and we don't deserve an ounce of it, but you do it for us anyways out of love, and we just can't thank you enough for that. So we ask, Lord, that your Old Testament, just like your New Testament, would be a blessing to us and that we would draw from it what you have there for us. Help these junior hires to get something out of your Old Testament. I ask that in your name, Lord. Amen. Real quick, though, before we go, guys, don't forget, today's last day to sign up for camp. Grab a flyer for Dragons. Wait, darn it. It's Dinos, Dragons, and Donuts. Woo! That was alliterations. That starts Friday. Graduation barbecue, water balloon, squirt gun fight is Thursday. Flyers are on the counter. Don't leave without them.
Did I have my phone?
Maybe.
It was black and it looks just like white. It is
Yo!
exactly like white.
Every phone is black and looks like Wyatt's to me. They're all just a bunch of random stuff.
But it is literally exactly like Wyatt's.
So just so you guys who do know, the last phone to touch the ground
Cafeteria.
gets a prize. Winner.
Sweet. Last day and I win.
Allie, give it to me.
Can I see it? Do you have like any phones that you don't
Leftovers? I'll go look. Who's we got?
Where are the flyers?
Flyers are on the kitchen counter right at the corner point. And they're all kind of spread out there. We got camp ones, barbecue ones, dinosaur ones.
Oh, do that shooting on in. Oh, that's shooting on in. Oh.
I can make this. There's a table by the front door downstairs with my laptop on it. And there's a pile of them.
Do you want us to turn the lights off? What?
Oh no, not yet. I'm trying to-
What? Oh, I know who that is.
Yeah? It was the one who you used on your Why today? I don't know what I want to. Yeah, we had some leftover foods we can breakfast. You're very welcome. Glad Olivia was here to welcome
Did she let you know that she doesn't want to be Mia?
Took me a good while to get used to that fact, but I should know by now. She's actually been telling me for a few months.
I'm Olivia.
She claims she never went by Via.
Lies.
That's what I said.
Such falsehood. Okay.
Who told me to call you Via though? Was it you or your mom? She's never told me to call you Via.
I never told you.
It might have been Simon.
Oh, it could have been Simon.
I have stark memories of being stopped by Olivia when I called her Olivia and told to call her Via.
Ah!
Stark memories, because there are very few times where a kid corrects you on their name, and it's usually when you're just completely wrong. You know, you just call a whole other person's name. It's usually how it goes.
Okay, so,
Ooh.
well, no, this is the thing. I know you said that you need to use the restroom, so we don't need to talk about this right now. I'm gonna put
For
her
sure,
on
for
later.
sure. Just so you know, the money I can't get back is the $50 of the deposit I have.
Okay.
But
So
in
if
the,
we
in the
do
case
have
she
to
has to
take
pull
her out, then we
I can get you not the 50 but the rest.
Okay,
Whatever that rest
so
is.
okay, so that's what it's gonna be dependent on because we just basically a week ago we went home upstairs and now we're upstairs and so all of this stuff is happening within a week that I didn't
These aren't
I wouldn't have
plans,
prepared
these
for.
are events.
Right, right. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't have waited. I might have waited till the last day to like kind of know it, but I would have let you guys know that she was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of in this jam. We're going to, if any possibility whatsoever, she can work too. Partial scholarship. If not, if there's no possibility of it, then I'm gonna have her. Okay.
But
Is
we
there
can
still that
do-
working possibility of the person that
That's
pays
the
the money?
scholarship.
Okay, so.
We can do payments.
Okay.
Spread it out as much as you guys
Okay.
want. But I can't do
Okay.
scholarships anymore.
Okay.
That window is closed.
And that's why I'm like, so with that being said, there is a possibility.
That it's not gonna work.
Well, not Elevate, Alta, the camp that Women's Retreat goes to. Okay, so this would have been her last year going there. Because they age out the summer after
Gotcha.
the year, so they're different than we are.
Do they have a junior high too?
No.
That would make perfect sense then why they would let you go an extra year.
And so our full intention had been, oh, she's going to Alta for the last year because she's not even gonna be upstairs. So in our
That makes
mind,
sense.
that's what's been happening. So in our mind, camp budget has been like 150-ish.
I haven't my phone.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, oh, they did say kid with the spiky hair.
They didn't know your name.
Yep. I'm Blaine.
Hey Blaine.
Alright.
I'll be in the high school next week though.
Oh, well,
We'll miss you, Blaine.
there's potential. Okay, we'll see. Okay, so let's put it on here so that she's on there, and then he and I will talk, and then I'll let
We'll
you
do
know
confirmation later.
shortly. But I'd rather have her there than not. Okay.
Right on.
And probably like by Wednesday we can let you know.
Oh, that's fine.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
But I'd rather her have the papers.
I gotta double check my numbers because most of our late signups have been guys. I don't think the girls' cabin is gonna get over crammed. And so
Is
I don't
there
think we'll have
just
to.
you going or?
Oh no, we've got 2 girl leaders right now
Good.
besides
Okay.
Emily.
Good.
Great. Yeah, it's pretty fantastic. We had 2 more guys sign up, they're here in the kitchen. I put their info on there, sign the sheets. Yes.
Okay, thank you for hearing me. I'll talk to you on Wednesday further. Because later this week it's gonna not be. Yeah, that's crazy. It was so hot in our house yesterday morning after making waffles and then having the oven on very low, forcing but just like cooking and cooking and cooking. That when Simon put his whipped cream on his waffles, the whipped cream like melted. Not because the waffles were hot or the strawberries were hot, but because the atmosphere was so hot in our house that literally it melted into a puddle on his waffles and just looked like there was milk poured all over his waffles. There was a little bit of like some bubbles. Yeah, he was like, Mom, can we turn on the air? Please. Maybe where should I go get that? And we'll figure out by Wednesday what's actually happening. Oh, yeah, that's my $7 to buy my women's dinner ticket. No, that's not your money. That's our money. You can have some sugared,
It's not candy.
but it's sugar.
But I want candy.
Oh, well. Get your stuff, we're gonna head out.
Alright. See ya.
See ya. Have a good one. Hey, Jane, let your parents sleep. Just saying, it is necessary.
lost adults here?
Say again?
No lost adults?
No.
I don't know where his dad went.
Well, amidst all